San Francisco, beautiful bohemian San Francisco, finds itself in a full-blown class and culture war, in a battle over real estate.
This community meeting started with the ruckus demonstration outside by opponents of the development.
We're in the middle of a terrible affordability crisis.
The booming tech industry has brought jobs and prosperity, but it's also brought a demand for housing that far outstrips supply, sparking a surge in luxury development, along with anger, fear, and greed.
I'm paying $956, and it's going up to $3,575.
$425,000 for 232 square feet, $1,800 per square foot.
The worlds of tenants, landlords, and homebuyers have been upended, pitting private interests against civic responsibility, tech workers against artists, rich against poor, and neighbor against neighbor.
We have more evictions than any other time in the city's history.
All of this threatens the fabric of San Francisco's cultural and artistic heritage and its progressive ideals.
These high-paid programmers, this is a playground for them. And they have the money to be able to put cash on the barrelhead and say, we want it, get out of our way.
If we had seen the thousands of people who have been displaced by a natural disaster, we would have called in FEMA and we would have said, help us.
The city just hasn't planned for it. They haven't zoned for it. They haven't built for it. We want to keep this jewel of a city the way that it is, and that just isn't going to work.
Don't let them take your home away from you and their city away from you. Fight back.
We're fighting for, in a way, the soul of this city.
I'm here in the Dubois Triangle neighborhood in San Francisco, and we're here to speak with David Brankus, a longtime resident of Walter Street. Brankus is about to be evicted, but he doesn't want to leave this place.
I'm happy to show you my home here. I've lived here 34 years. As you can see, I'm an artist. I have memories of youth here, memories of pain, injury, and of great joys and triumphs.
The apartment is both his home and his workspace.
And then back here is one of my dark rooms. Everything you see I've built myself.
He retiled the bathroom and renovated the basement, turning it into a usable space.
I've got a woodworking studio down here. I'm losing my workspace as well as my living space. I'll never be able to duplicate that.
Brankus and his roommate pay just $735 a month for this rent-controlled two-bedroom apartment. Brankus also counts as his contribution all the work he's put into the space over the years.
Anywhere you live for 34 years, you pass that amount of time in a place and I don't know what to say. It becomes a part of you and you become a part of it.
Very soon, he faces near certain eviction. In 2014, the 3-unit building was bought in foreclosure by Ish Hasharwath and his family. Ish is the co-founder of a tech startup, and his wife Emma is an art curator.
Our plan since the beginning has been to move our family into the house. Grandparents downstairs, my wife and me here in the middle unit with our baby girl, and then my brother in the top unit.
In the San Francisco, legally, when you purchase a building, you also are buying the tenants that live there too.
Sure.
So you knew that you were going to have to either buy out or evict the people living here.
Yep.
Why not just buy a different building?
We tried to find a 3-unit building in this neighborhood that we could all live in as a family. It wasn't easy. We were looking for 2 years for a place.
After the Harshawaths purchased the property, they offered buyouts to the tenants. 2 took them, but Brankus did not. The family eventually upped their offer to $135,000, $80,000 for Brankus and $55,000 for his roommate. Brankus declined.
I myself have suffered greatly, through all this stress. It's not a way to live. People who are trying to force you out, they bank on that. They bank that the stress will make you move in the end. But I won't. I will fight as long as I can because I think somebody has to. Somebody has to say, this is wrong. It's wrong for the city.
And fight he has. Brankus has staged protests at the museum where Emma works and at their now shared home.
What do we want?
Stop the eviction!
When do we want it?
He wanted to essentially make the story about me as an assistant curator evicting an artist.
In February of 2015, when the negotiations broke down, the Harshawaths filed to evict Brinkus. By law, there are two primary types of no-fault evictions in San Francisco. One is used when owners move in, but it can't be invoked if tenants are seniors or disabled. Second is the Ellis Act. It is designed to allow landlords to, quote, go out of business, and does not protect any class of tenants. The property cannot be re-rented for a period of years, but it can be sold or condo converted. The Harshawaths filed for an Ellis Act eviction of David Brinkus.
Did it ever occur to you, though, that being that you were a renter and not an owner of the home, that something like this could happen someday?
Sure, it occurred to me. However, you have to understand that the people who lived here, I formed a relationship with them. The people who owned the place, I mean. After a certain point, it seemed like, well, this is a place I can live long term. And then they went bankrupt in the financial crisis. They lost everything. And it was a catastrophe for them, and it became a catastrophe for me.
We just don't feel that we represent the problem here. We're homeowners that want to live in a property that we rightfully purchased. We should not be the scapegoats for a problem that the city really bears responsibility for.
He doesn't get a lifetime lease on that unit for that much money. We don't believe that that's fair either. If that's how the property laws in the United States are supposed to work, then I guess we're under a different sort of system than what I thought we had in this country.
The crisis has intensified over the last 5 years, with home prices skyrocketing 67%, and the median home price now coming in at $1.1 million. Scarcity is a huge part of the problem. Nearly half of the housing stock is rent-controlled apartments. 36% is owner-occupied. Just 9% are market-rate rentals. That sliver of free market opportunity is being exploited to the max. The average one-bedroom rental? $3,600, greater than New York or Boston. Aaron McElroy is the director of the Anti-Eviction Mapping Project, which uses data visualization to chronicle the eviction crisis in the Bay Area.
Since 2011, evictions have risen dramatically, as have rental prices and property values. Right now, San Francisco is considered the city in which income inequality is growing more rapidly than any other city in the U.S. due to the rich getting richer.
City Supervisor Jane Kim represents constituents harmed by what she calls greed-fueled evictions.
And we've seen a tremendous increase in no-fault evictions in San Francisco. What's extraordinary about that is over 70% of those no-fault evictions target seniors, immigrants, and individuals with disabilities, so often our most vulnerable residents.
Speculators are buying up buildings under the pretense of being landlords, immediately evicting the tenants, and then selling the buildings and making a lot of money.
And now, even for-cause evictions are on the rise.
What we're finding is that people are being evicted for really petty things like bringing your bike in through the front door or hanging laundry out on the clothesline.
It's doubtful any of this would be happening were it not for the booming technology sector. Unlike the late 1990s, many of this era's top companies, including Salesforce, Twitter, and Uber, are choosing to locate in the city, flooding the market with high-paid workers. Even techies who work in Silicon Valley are opting to live in the city and commute via luxury charter buses.
69% of no-fault evictions between 2011 and 2013 occurred within 4 blocks of the private tech bus stops.
Wait, say that again? How many?
69%.
69% of no-fault evictions.
Between 2011 and 2013 occurred within 4 blocks of the private tech bus stops. They're symbolic, but they're also actually material in terms of their impact.
Airbnb, itself a lauded local startup, has been at the center of its own San Francisco controversy, with landlords kicking out tenants to effectively become full-time B&Bs. A November referendum would have limited the number of days in a month that a home could be rented out this way. Airbnb staged a multi-million-dollar advertising, public relations, and lobbying campaign, and the measure went down to narrow defeat. Without question, the tech industry has invigorated the local economy. San Francisco's unemployment is in the 3% range, among the lowest anywhere. And in October, the Bay Area accounted for 42% of California's job growth, even though it has less than 20% of the population.
Those companies also bring a lot of jobs and a lot of economic benefits to the regions. They can't be all bad.
There's no evidence that working class jobs are being preserved or created, and in fact it seems as though people are being either exploited or paid a lot of money and not a lot in between.
Danny Yadigar is a prime example of someone in between. He's neither a tech worker nor working for the minimum wage.
I make over 80. I make about 85.
And you can't afford to rent a marketplace unit here?
No, definitely not. Because the rent is so high in San Francisco, more often than not, you end up moving into an apartment where somebody has had a lease for several years. You often end up moving into whatever room you can find.
Yadigar did just that, moving into a room on someone else's lease 2 years ago. The 3-bedroom rent-controlled unit cost $3,500 a month. But the building recently sold. His lease-holding roommate is taking a buyout, and Yadigar is out of luck. Like most people in his position, he started to scour Craigslist.
I have seen postings of beds, like bunk beds, that are going for over $1,000 a month. Or people, I just saw somebody was renting a truck that was like parked in a 24-hour area. And they were renting, it was just like a U-Haul. And they're renting it for $750.
I asked Danny to show me what market rate rentals in his neighborhood looked like.
So do you want a taste of my misery?
I do want a taste of your misery.
Okay, here's a 1-bedroom for $4,800. Here's a 2-bedroom for $5,700.
Oh, bargain.
I don't really understand who's making this much money, to be really frank. And also, like, if you are making that much money, why aren't you buying a house?
Even for those making that kind of money, the sales market is often no better than the rental one. To see what potential buyers like Yadigar were up against, we toured a North Beach studio with a local real estate agent.
I've had one open house, been on the market 11 days. We've actually had them lined up at the door for that first open house. This could be your living area, and this is your TV. The TV is coming with the unit. Possibly you could put your bed here, you could do a futon type bed that pulls out, or you could do a Murphy bed. There's a lot of great options for creative people. So this is your kitchen, 2-burner stoves. You can always put a microwave in.
No oven though, I see.
No oven, no.
It's 232 square feet. What is the listing price?
$425,000.
$1,800 per square foot.
Yeah.
Only in San Francisco.
Only in San Francisco.
Danny Yadigar did look into potentially buying a home, but the experience was far worse than he was expecting.
It's pretty ruthless, the way that realtors advertise property. I think it's just a movement towards the understanding of housing as an asset rather than like a home where people live. You'll see in a listing, they will say 3-unit, no protected tenants. So it's like, hey, you can kick people out if you want. And they're not even shy about it.
And he says the ethical lapses extend beyond evictions.
We'll write an offer, and then 2 hours later we'll come back and say, hey, there's other offers. Why don't you guys rewrite, and we'll have pole position. And then they come back a couple hours later. And they're like, hey, change this number, you got it. And so we've walked away from a couple deals because we were like, this is like collusion and extortion at the same time.
When the first internet bubble burst in 2001, Bay Area housing prices took a huge hit, which could happen again. One difference now, though, many of the companies who employ today's Bay Area home seekers have real revenues and long-term futures.
Is San Francisco's housing market in a bubble right now?
I think if you compare the per square foot sales prices to other expensive cities around the world, like New York and London, San Francisco is similar. So that actually is really scary to me, to think it might not be a bubble, to think it might be something that is going to be around for a long time.
State and local policies and politics underlie much of the crisis. For example, why aren't more houses built down peninsula in Silicon Valley? The answer? Tax laws, especially Proposition 13, which caps property taxes and effectively incentivizes the building of commercial, not residential space. And in the city, there are complex and time-consuming zoning requirements for every new project, starting with an environmental impact analysis.
Normally, it will take 6 to 9 months for them to assign you a planner who will begin to figure out how to do that environmental impact analysis. And normally it will take several years before they're done studying it.
Even after a project receives sign-off from the Planning Commission, residents can then appeal the project, and many don't hesitate. Dave Osgood, the head of the Rincon Point Neighborhood Association, is one such resident.
Spend a lot of my time following city planning issues, trying to keep San Francisco on the right course.
One of the things that you read a lot in the news stories about the housing crisis and the developmental issues in the city is that there's institutional NIMBYism, or not in my backyard. But from what you're saying, that's not really the case. There's only a few select projects that individuals or groups oppose in the city, is that right?
Oh, exactly right. Only 2-3% of projects that get this kind of opposition, and I find that that's completely reasonable. If you look at the skyline now, you'll see that there's scores and scores, perhaps hundreds, of large buildings under construction.
So almost all of the construction that I've seen walking around San Francisco has been luxury high-rise condominiums, which aren't really going to help most of the people that want to live here. I feel like there's a disconnect there. Why are there so many buildings like that versus other buildings that might actually house more real San Franciscans?
The rich people that would go into a fancy new condo, if they don't get to go in that condo, it's not that they just disappear. They buy the place you live and evict you. And so it actually helps to stack them up in concrete boxes on top of each other.
So yes, residential developers are busy building in San Francisco, and they have a choice. Set aside a percentage of each project for affordable housing, build a corresponding amount of affordable housing within a mile of the building, or pay a large fee to the city, the last of which many opt to do.
By contributing to an affordable housing program, their donation will probably go to a good program that helps the very poorest people in a very poor neighborhood, and that's good. But it also contributes to the big gulf between the haves and the have-nots. You're getting a luxury building on the waterfront and something for the poorest, perhaps the homeless people in the Tenderloin, but there's nothing to help the moderate income residents. Nothing for them.
We are struggling with economic inequality as much as anywhere, and that's bigger than us, right? It's a national and a global problem. It's just that we want to do better because we actually have progressive values here and we care about it.
Janis Joplin called San Francisco home, as did so many great 20th century American musicians and writers. The city brought us the anti-war hippies of Haight-Ashbury and gay rights leader Harvey Milk. Its strong countercultural and progressive values live on. Don Falk is the CEO of a housing nonprofit in the Tenderloin, long one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city.
And we're directly across the street from a parking lot where we aspire to build an 8-story building that will house 110 households, 110 families mostly, who will all pay affordable rents. What we want at TNDC, we want people who, when they walk in to our buildings, they feel like, I'm home.
This is a safe place.
This is safe, it's warm, the street is behind me, and now I'm someplace else.
TNDC started buying land in 1981 and now owns 35 buildings comprising 3,000 units. As Falk explains, this puts the land into nonprofit hands and dedicates it in perpetuity to low-income people.
Quite a few of them are visible from here. So I had said there's Franciscan Towers, which we just finished renovating. That's new construction. It's called Current House. That's 67 family units. There's a way in which the Tenderloin is a model, not just for the rest of San Francisco, but really for the whole country, because so many big cities are experiencing this crisis. And that is that to take the long-term view and to put land into the hands of nonprofits, and basically this land is tied up forever.
The nearby Mission District, long an artist's haven, is now among the most sought-after areas by tech workers. Its outspoken supervisor, Dave Campos, wants the government to buy land in the community and proposed a moratorium on development to that effect.
You cannot have art without artists. And artists are no longer able to live in San Francisco because it's too expensive for them. The free market is not going to address this issue on its own. There is a role for government to play, because if you leave it up to the developer will not only build luxury housing, heck, they'll build ultra luxury housing.
Among those offering solutions, there are plenty of pro-development voices.
We could change our city charter to basically say that if you are proposing to build housing that fits within the zoning, it's automatically allowed. We'd say, please build it.
Supervisor Kim wants to streamline the process once a project is approved.
This is a project we want to see here in San Francisco. You've jumped over every hurdle. I think that we as a city should be helping you build faster at that point.
Others want to use financial disincentives.
We had a ballot measure last year to basically require speculators would pay a tax if they sold a building after buying it within 5 years.
The silver lining is that things have gotten so bad that finally something will happen.
People are justifiably passionate about it. We're talking about people's lives, their futures, their families, all of it.
If you are indeed evicted, as it looks like is probably going to happen, where will you go?
I don't know. I really don't know. None of us have very good options about what to do. When you're forced out, you can't turn around and rent a new place.
Someone else owns this building now, though. Why shouldn't they be able to do with it as they please when your lease expires?
It's immoral to do what they're doing. You're permitted by law to do it, but it's not right that they are doing it.
From a moral perspective, we do feel that we're doing the best we can here. We looked for 2 years for a place. This is the place we found finally that met what we needed and within our price range. You know, if that hadn't happened, doubtful that we would have been able to stay in the city also.
There was a time when you traveled and you say, I'm from San Francisco, and you could be in another country where they have a very low opinion of Americans, and they would say, San Francisco, that's all right. They know it's a cool place. People are nice. But now it's not the case anymore.
The housing shortage in the cities, this is what it's done. It's forced people to fight against each other for housing.
It's our most important problem, but we do have the power to solve it. We could make different choices that would at least make it a lot better, and I hope we do.
Can San Francisco be the quirky, interesting, progressive city that it has been if middle-class people can no longer afford to live in San Francisco? We're talking about San Francisco and neighborhoods like the Mission becoming places where only wealthy millionaires can live.